The world felt different that morning. As the sun began to rise, casting its first golden rays through the half-drawn curtains, everything seemed too still, too quiet. Liam could feel the heaviness in the air before his feet even hit the cold floor. His best friend, the dog he had grown up with, wasn't there. The small apartment felt unusually vast as he searched every room. "Charlie," he called out softly, almost as if afraid to disturb the silence. Charlie had always been there, a constant presence through every high and low. His brown fur was a comforting sight, his wagging tail a reminder that everything would be okay, no matter what. But now, the absence of his joyful energy was like a missing heartbeat. The night before, Liam remembered, had been the usual routine. A quiet dinner, the television playing softly in the background, and Charlie curled up at his feet. But when Liam had woken up this morning, the usual greeting from Charlie, the soft panting and warm, familiar nudge against his hand, had not come. It was as if the life had been sucked out of the room. Liam stumbled to the door, pulling on his sneakers with trembling fingers. The world outside was bustling, but inside him was a storm. He ran down the stairs to the courtyard, scanning the familiar places Charlie loved, the swing, the benches, the tall tree by the fence. Nothing. His heart sank, heavy with dread. He called for him again, louder this time, his voice cracking. "Charlie!" But there was no answer. No joyful bark, just the wind, carrying the sound of the world moving on without him. Days passed in a blur. Liam barely noticed the hours slipping away, the sun rising and setting without much distinction. He spent his mornings knocking on doors, asking anyone who might have seen Charlie. His afternoons were filled with walking the streets, calling his name into the emptiness, the echo of his voice lost in the distant hum of traffic. But no one had seen the dog. The streets he once roamed freely were now a cruel maze, each corner reminding Liam of the distance between him and the only friend he could always rely on. The uncertainty gnawed at him. He kept thinking back to the last moments he'd seen Charlie, that playful bark as they chased each other through the alley behind the building. But that was days ago, and now it felt like Charlie had never existed at all. The emptiness was overwhelming, like a hollow space in his chest that no amount of searching could fill. His family was supportive, but they didn't understand. "He's probably just wandered off, Liam. Dogs do that sometimes," his mom had said, her voice soft with the attempt at comfort. But Liam knew better. Charlie wasn't just any dog. He was more than that. He was part of him, part of his life. He wouldn't just wander off without reason. One evening, as Liam sat on the porch, staring at the setting sun, something in his gut told him the truth. Charlie was gone, perhaps forever. A wave of coldness washed over him as he finally accepted the impossible Charlie might not come back. It was late when the phone rang. Liam's heart raced as he fumbled to pick it up, his thoughts still tangled in the last remnants of the day's grief. It was a number he didn't recognize, but when he heard the voice on the other end, his heart skipped a beat. As this lamb, the voice asked, a hint of urgency in its tone. "I have your dog. He's here with us at the shelter." Liam's mind raced. "Charlie," he asked, barely able to the words escaping his mouth. "Is he okay?" "What happened?" "He's alive, but he's hurt. He wandered into traffic, and we think he might have been hit. We're giving him medical care, but he needs to be with you." The voice softened. "You should come and bring your family. He's going to need a lot of care, but we think he'll make it." Neen didn't need to hear another word. He was already running, the tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed for days now spilling freely down his cheeks. He wasn't going to lose Charlie. Not like this. Not after everything they'd been through together. The drive to the shelter felt like a lifetime. His mind was a blur of emotions. Hope, fear, disbelief. He could already picture Charlie's face, the familiar soft brown eyes, the warm fur. The what if it wasn't the same? What if Charlie wasn't the dog he remembered? The thought gnawed at him, but he pushed it away, focusing only on the road ahead. When Liam stepped into the shelter, he saw Charlie immediately. Lying on a soft bed, hooked up to an IV, his once bright eyes now dull with exhaustion. The sight of his dog, so small and fragile, took Liam's breath away. His heart tightened. Charlie was no longer the playful, full of life dog he once knew. But there was still a flicker of recognition in those eyes. Liam approached slowly, kneeling down beside the bed. "Charlie, I'm here," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Charlie's tail whipped determined flicked once, twice, a small, hopeful sign. Liam reached out to gently stroke his dog's head, his fingers trembling as they made contact with the warm, soft fur. "I thought I'd lost you forever," he said, the words coming out in a shaky breath. Charlie let out a small sigh, a sound that almost felt like a whisper of comfort. In that moment, Liam knew that no matter what, they were going to make it through. The dog he had thought was lost was still there, a little broken, but not gone. It wasn't easy. There were days when Charlie couldn't walk, days when Liam sat beside him, coaxing him to take a few more steps, offering words of encouragement. There were nights filled with worry, watching his dog as he slept, praying that he would wake up and be okay. But slowly, things began to change. Charlie began to stand on his own, to walk without help. His once exhausted eyes began to shine with that familiar spark of life. Liam never left his side, offering love and patience as Charlie healed. Their bond deepened in a way neither of them could have expected. Charlie had fought to stay alive, and Liam fought alongside him, never once doubting that they would make it through. And finally, the day came when Charlie stood tall, his tail wagging energetically as he trotted across the yard. Liam watched, his heart swelling with pride. "You did it, buddy," he whispered, kneeling to hug his dog. "We did it." It wasn't just Charlie who had healed. Liam had too. In rescuing Charlie, he had rescued himself, finding strength in the most fragile of places. And as they stood together, side by side, the world around them felt right again, forever changed, forever whole. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the yard, Liam and Charlie walked together, the boy and his dog, both of them, finally home. It had been weeks since Charlie's return, and though the wounds had healed, the memory of the uncertainty still lingered. Liam woke up each morning with a quiet reminder of just how fragile life could be. He found himself watching Charlie more closely now, as if trying to memorize every part of him, to capture this moment before it slipped away again. The morning light filtered through the blinds, warming the room, but it was Charlie's steady breathing beside him that gave the day its rhythm. Charlie's limp had mostly faded, but there was a tenderness in his movements that reminded Liam of how much they had both been through. The dog had been through a physical battle, but Liam had fought a different kind of war. The war within himself, where doubt and fear once gripped him tightly, had slowly released its hold. They walked together now, in silence, the world around them waking up as they passed through the quiet neighborhood streets. Liam no longer rushed. He didn't need to. Everything felt sacred now. Every step, every bark, every nudge of Charlie's nose against his hand felt like a small miracle. Liam could see the way Charlie looked at him. Trust, gratitude, and love, and in return, Liam felt a deep sense of purpose he had never experienced before. Their bond, forged through pain and hope, was unbreakable. They had crossed through the darkness together and emerged into a place where both of them had been given a second chance. They passed the alley where Charlie had been lost. It no longer felt like a haunted place. It felt like a crossroads, the point where everything had shifted. Liam stopped, bending down to look into Charlie's eyes. "We made it, didn't we?" he whispered. The dog tilted his head, his tail wagging gently, and for the first time in a long while, Liam smiled. It wasn't a forced smile, but one that came from the deepest part of him, one that acknowledged everything they had been through and everything they had become because of it. Together, the world didn't stop for them. Life continued to unfold. School, work, the endless demands of the day. But everything had changed. It wasn't the big moments that defined them now, but the small ones. A quiet afternoon spent lying in the grass, the hum of a passing car distant, as Charlie curled up next to Liam with his head resting on his lap. The sound of Charlie's breath, soft and steady, as Liam absent-mindedly stroked his fur. The moments where nothing had to be said, where words weren't needed, and where all that mattered was the presence of each other. Liam had once thought the world outside his window was something to conquer. He had dreamed of adventures far beyond what his life had offered. But now, those big dreams had been replaced by something simpler, something more grounded. He didn't need to go far to find what he was searching for. It was here, with Charlie. It had always been with Charlie. As autumn began to paint the world in shades of gold and amber, Liam noticed how much the seasons had changed him, too. The boy who had once lived in uncertainty, constantly looking ahead to a future full of unknowns, now understood that true peace could only be found in the present. Every moment with Charlie was a gift, one that he no longer took for granted. One morning, as they sat on the porch, the sunlight warming their faces, Liam thought about how far they had come. He remembered the days when he had felt so alone, and how, in that silence, he had found a way to survive. But survival wasn't enough. He didn't just want to make it through. He wanted to thrive, to live fully. And with Charlie by his side, he knew that was possible. Liam turned to Charlie, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You and me, buddy," he said softly. "We're going to be all right." Charlie didn't answer, but in the way he leaned against Liam's side, Liam knew the dog understood. They didn't need words, they had each other. That was enough. Time continued to stretch forward, its pace marked by the subtle shifts in the seasons, in the world, and in Liam's own heart. With each passing day, the fear of losing Charlie that had once consumed him faded, replaced by a deep, rooted certainty that they were meant to be together. Charlie's condition had fully improved, and though he still bore the marks of his past, a slight scar on his leg and a tenderness in his eyes, he was whole again. More than that, he had become a symbol of resilience, not just for Liam, but for everyone who had witnessed their journey. It wasn't until one late afternoon, as Liam watched Charlie chase after a falling leaf in the yard, that he realized something profound. The fear of loss, which had once plagued him, no longer ruled his life. He understood now that love, real love, wasn't about holding on so tightly that you suffocate it. It was about letting go enough to let the love breathe and grow. Charlie, with his playful bark and his unrelenting spirit, had taught him this. And in turn, Liam had given Charlie the love and safety he had never known. Their bond, deepened by adversity, was a miracle of its own. The days felt longer now, not because they were full of burdens, but because they were full of life. With every sunrise, Liam knew that he was exactly where he needed to be, with the one who had always understood him. As the seasons turned once again, Liam and Charlie continued to walk through life together. Side by side, they grew, they healed, and they thrived. And in every step, every gentle nudge of Charlie's nose against his hand, Liam found that the real miracle wasn't in the grand moments, but in the quiet, simple act of being there for each other, in the moments that, once gone, would be the ones he remembered most. The years passed, but Liam never forgot the moment when he thought he had lost Charlie forever. It was that memory that had shaped him, made him who he was today. A man who understood the value of every moment, the fragility of life, and the deep, irreplaceable bond between a boy and his dog. And as they grew older together, Liam knew that even when the inevitable came, the day when Charlie would be gone from his side, it would be okay, because the love they shared could never be erased. It would live on in every corner of Liam's heart, every memory of the two of them running together, chasing after joy in the simplest ways. That was the real miracle. Liam walked through the years knowing that no matter what came next, he and Charlie would always have each other. And that promise, in its quiet, unspoken way, would last forever. The story of Liam and Charlie reminds us that sometimes the greatest miracles aren't the ones we expect. They're the quiet moments of love, healing, and connection that unfold when we least anticipate them. The miracle isn't just in the rescue, but in the life that follows, built on the foundation of resilience and unconditional love. The world around them continued to shift just as it had before. Seasons came and went, bringing with them changes that were both welcomed and feared. Winter arrived with a chill in the air, and Liam found himself holding on to Charlie a little tighter, feeling the weight of time moving forward. The warmth of their bond was even more precious in the cold. The two of them curled up together on the couch, the quiet crackle of a fire in the hearth punctuating the silence. As Charlie aged, his steps became slower, his once vibrant energy now softened by the years. His fur, once rich and thick, started to lose its shine, becoming thinner in places, a quiet reminder that time had touched them both. But Liam didn't mind. He cherished each moment with Charlie, the dog who had shown him what it meant to fight, to love, and to live with no regrets. Their walks grew shorter. But even on the days when Charlie couldn't walk as far, Liam would kneel beside him, talk him softly, telling him stories of the things they'd done together. And Charlie would nuzzle his hand, his eyes full of the same trust and understanding he'd always had. It didn't matter how old they got. They were always going to be each other's world. One cold evening, as the first snowflakes of winter gently fell outside the window, Liam sat beside Charlie, who lay curled up on his bed. His heart ached with the knowledge that this time, unlike before, he couldn't change the inevitable. "You're my best friend. You know that," Liam whispered, his voice barely a murmur, as he ran his fingers through Charlie's fur. "I love you." Charlie opened his eyes slowly, lifting his head for just a moment before resting it again. There was an understanding in the old dog's eyes that words could never express. It was as if Charlie was telling Liam, without a single sound, that he had lived a life full of love, of purpose. He had lived a life that mattered. The snow outside fell heavier, the quiet of the evening wrapping around them like a blanket. Time had been kind to them in its own way. The fear that had once consumed Liam was gone, replaced by a peace he had never expected. He didn't need to know how much time they'd left. What mattered now was that they had shared something irreplaceable, a connection that would survive beyond anything else. As the months turned into years, the inevitable moment arrived. Charlie's body, tired and worn, had begun to give out. His breathing grew shallow, his steps uncertain, and his once bright eyes began to fade. Liam watched closely, his heart heavy with the knowledge the time had come to say goodbye. On one warm afternoon, as the sun streamed through the window, casting a golden glow over the living room, Liam held Charlie's head in his lap. The dog, now frail but still with the quiet strength he'd always had, looked up at Liam one last time. His tail gave a gentle, slow wag, and for a brief moment, it was as if Charlie was reassuring him. A final gift of comfort, a last gesture of love. Liam's eyes filled with tears as he whispered, his voice trembling, "I'll never forget you. You'll always be with me, in everything I do." The house felt emptier without Charlie's presence, but Liam knew that what they had shared was something that could never be lost. It would live on in his heart, in the small gestures of kindness, in the quiet moments where he could almost feel Charlie's presence beside him. And just like that, the miracle had come full circle. It wasn't in the grand moments of rescue or in the reunion. It was in the love they had shown each other through every season, through every trial, and through the years they had spent side by side. The real miracle was the quiet moments, the understanding that they didn't need anything more than each other. Charlie's passing was not an end, but a transformation, a shift into something eternal, something that could never be taken away. Liam understood that love wasn't something bound by time. It wasn't something that could fade with age or distance. It was something that stayed with you forever, even after the last breath had been taken. As he stood beside the spot in the yard where Charlie used to lie, watching the sunset one final time, Liam closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Charlie, for everything." Years later, when Liam looked back on everything, the days when he feared he'd never see Charlie again, the miracle of their reunion, the moments of growth and healing, he realized something profound. The love they had shared, the bond they had formed, was a part of who he had become. It had shaped him in ways he couldn't have imagined back then. Every time he saw a dog in the street, or a leaf danced in the wind, or the sun rose over the horizon, Liam could feel the presence of Charlie beside him. He had learned that some miracles weren't meant to be explained. They were meant to be felt. In the warmth of a wagging tail, in the quiet comfort of a friend, and in the understanding that some connections never truly fade. They simply change form, living on in the spaces between breaths. Liam never stopped missing Charlie. He didn't need to. He understood now that love wasn't something you could lose, no matter what happened. It was something that lived on, forever, in the quietest of moments, in the spaces where the world had forgotten to look. And as he walked through life, carrying the memory of his best friend with him, Liam knew that Charlie's legacy would never be forgotten. It would live on, not just in his heart, but in every life he touched, in every small act of kindness and love that he gave to the world. Charlie had taught him that the truest miracles weren't the ones you waited for. They were the ones you found in the moments that mattered the most, the ones that always there, waiting for you to notice. The story of Liam and Charlie reminds us that love, loss, and healing are not just concepts, but realities we all experience. It is the resilience to carry on and the understanding that even the most fleeting connections leave behind lasting imprints, ones that stay with us, no matter where life takes us. As Liam continued on with his life, Charlie's absence was felt not just in the quiet moments, but in the loud ones too. It was in the moments of laughter that felt incomplete, in the days that stretched out before him without the familiar rhythm of Charlie's paws on the hardwood floor. He missed the way Charlie would nudge his hand for a scratch, the soft thump of his tail against the furniture. But as time passed, Liam realized that Charlie had left him with more than just memories. He had left him with a legacy. Liam began to adopt the lessons Charlie had taught him, lessons he had never truly understood until after his passing. The importance of patience, the depth of unconditional love, the quiet strength it takes to rise again no matter how hard life tries to knock you down. Every act of kindness, every gesture of empathy, was now colored with the wisdom Charlie had imparted. One day, Liam found himself walking past the local animal shelter, his footsteps slowing as he caught sight of a dog looking through the bars of a cage. It was an older dog, one with a coat starting to gray around the edges, and its eyes were full of that same quiet sadness Charlie's once had. Without thinking, Liam stepped inside. The dog didn't bark or jump. Instead, it just sat there, waiting for something for someone. Liam approached cautiously, feeling the familiar stirrings in his heart. This dog, much like Charlie, had a history, a past of uncertainty, maybe even of neglect. But Liam didn't hesitate. He knew, just as he had known with Charlie, that this dog deserved the love he had to give. And just like that, Liam adopted a new friend. He named him Max, a name that felt right, a name that carried with it the promise of new beginnings. Liam didn't think Max could ever replace Charlie. Nothing could, but he had learned that the love they shared wasn't something finite. It was infinite, stretching across time, across lives. The heart could hold more than one deep bond, and Liam had room for this new chapter. Liam's life with Max was different, but in many ways, it mirrored the life he had shared with Charlie. Max wasn't as young or as playful, but he had the same warmth, the same unspoken understanding that made their bond unbreakable. With every walk, every game of fetch, every quiet evening spent together, Liam was reminded that love didn't have to come with grand gestures. It came in the small, everyday moments, in the quiet companionship, in the joy of simply being there for one another. Max grew older, too, just as Charlie had. And though the inevitable truth loomed on the horizon, Liam no longer feared it. He had learned from the pain of loss, and he had learned how to cherish every moment. He understood now that nothing lasts forever, and yet everything matters in the time that we have. One evening, as Liam sat on the porch with Max, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he found himself reflecting on everything that had brought him here. The days spent searching for Charlie, the miracle of their reunion, and the quiet, undramatic moments that had ultimately defined his life. The world didn't have to be perfect, and life didn't have to be flawless. What mattered was the love that filled the gaps, the strength that could be found in the quietest of moments. Liam looked down at Max, who lay beside him, eyes calm, content. There was peace in their companionship, in the soft rhythm of each other's presence. The world might have changed, the seasons might have passed, but the lessons that Charlie had left behind would always remain. "Thank you, buddy," Liam whispered, his voice carrying in the stillness of the evening. "Thank you for everything." Max didn't answer, but he nuzzled Liam's hand as if he too understood. As the years rolled on, Liam continued to carry the lessons of both Charlie and Max in his heart. He shared his story with friends, with family, and even with strangers who came to him looking for advice or comfort. He knew what it felt like to lose something precious, to feel that hollow, painful emptiness, but he also knew what it felt like to heal. Not through grand gestures, but through time, through love, through the small acts of care that wove the fabric of his everyday life. And as he shared his journey, others began to see the power of that love, that unbreakable bond between human and animal, between two beings who had been through the worst and come out stronger. Liam's story, the story of Charlie's rescue, their years together, and the love that had never faded, became a beacon for those who were struggling, those who feared they had lost everything. They learned, through Liam, that the love they felt for their pets, for their family, would never disappear. It would stay with them long after the last goodbye, because love isn't bound by time or place. It lives on forever in the hearts of those who remember. As the years passed, Liam became a man who carried both his pain and his joy with him, a man who understood that life was a delicate balance of loss and growth, of holding on and letting go. And whenever he looked into the eyes of Max or any dog he met along the way, he knew that no matter what happened, he had loved deeply, and that love would never fade. One final evening, as Liam sat alone in his home, the quiet of the night settling around him, he found himself gazing out the window, remembering. He remembered Charlie, the first dog he had ever truly loved, the one who had changed his life forever. And he remembered the quiet moments, the soft touches, the companionship that had carried them through both the darkest and the brightest times. Max had passed away years ago, but his spirit still lingered. And so did Charlie's. Their love, their friendship, their loyalty, it was all a part of Liam now, woven into the very fabric of who he had become. The lessons they had taught him, the strength they had given him, would stay with him always. Liam stood up, walking to the door, opening it to let the night air in. He could almost feel Charlie's presence beside him, could almost hear the soft rustle of fur as the dog walked beside him, the familiar weight of his body. Liam smiled softly, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Thank you," he whispered to the night. And in that moment, Liam understood that love, true love, never really leaves. It stays, it lingers, it echoes in every part of you long after the story ends, forever together. Years passed, but Liam never truly let go of the love he shared with Charlie. It wasn't that he couldn't move on. It was that Charlie had left a mark so deep, a part of his soul that would never fade. He often found himself reflecting on their time together, the quiet moments, the days spent side by side. Life had changed, yes, but in ways that made him a better person, a more patient person. Charlie had taught him how to love unconditionally, how to fight for those you care about, and how to let go when the time came. Max, his new companion, had brought joy back into his life, but it was never the same. Max wasn't meant to replace Charlie, and he never could. But he had his own place in Liam's heart, a place he had carved out through his own quiet loyalty and the same love that had once been given to Charlie. Together, they formed a new chapter, one filled with gentle walks, shared silence, and the kind of understanding that didn't require words. And as Liam grew older, he found comfort in knowing that the bond he shared with Charlie was timeless, undying. He understood now that love, in its purest form, isn't something that fades when the physical presence is gone. It lingers like a soft echo that travels through time. It leaves its imprint on everything you do, every choice you make, and every person you encounter. One night, as Liam sat in his favorite chair, watching the moonlight filter through the window, he thought about how much he had learned from his dogs. The nights spent in Charlie's company, the quiet afternoons with Max, had taught him that life wasn't about grand gestures, but about the small, meaningful moments, the shared looks, the soft nuzzles, the warmth of a dog curled up beside you. These were the moments that lasted. There was no grand farewell, no dramatic end. The lessons of love, loss, and resilience weren't written in the moments when he held his dog close for the last time. They were written in the quiet, day-to-day moments that made up a life well lived. It was those moments that mattered. The ones that carried him through the darkness, that reminded him of what he was capable of, and that love was something you carried with you, not something you left behind. In the years that followed, Liam never stopped talking about Charlie. To his family, to his friends, and even to Max, who seemed to understand without words. He'd tell the stories, the small ones, like the way Charlie used to nudge his hand when he wanted attention, or the way he'd curl up beside Liam at night as though to say, "We're in this together." He would smile, remembering those quiet moments, the ones that spoke louder than any words ever could. Charlie's legacy lived on in Liam, in the way he treated others, in the way he loved, and in the way he saw the world. He had been given a second chance, and he had spent it in the best way possible, loving the dog who had changed his life. And now, with Max beside him, Liam knew that while life had its inevitable ups and downs, the love he had experienced would never be lost. It would live on in every pet he would ever have, every person he would meet, and every single day he was lucky enough to be alive. The love he had shared with Charlie wasn't just a chapter in his life. It was the story that shaped him, and it would stay with him forever. And so, with the quiet hum of life around him, Liam sat back, letting the warmth of those memories fill his heart. He whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Charlie. I'll always love you." In that moment, he felt the gentle presence of his old friend beside him, as if Charlie had never truly left, and in a way, he hadn't.